Hello and welcome to the free conferences of the Big Three. So follow me on Viking Poet 84 at Twitter. You're going to see there's a lot of great resources and memes. I put the especially spicy memes on there. So the free conferences. So basically the Americans, British and the Russians, the Soviet Union, have these free conferences during and after World War II. So the first conference is the Tehran conference in 1943. It's actually held in Iran, in Tehran there. And the second conference is in Yalta in the Ukraine. And the third conference after the victory is held in Potsdam. Now, what we have different leaders there. So the first leader that I'd like to focus on is the man of steel himself. So Joseph Stalin. Now, the thing about Joseph Stalin is, well, he sees himself as a very strong leader, a very masculine leader, and he definitely ruled his country with an iron fist. And you've got to remember, this is the man who would not let his army retreat and defeated Adolf Hitler in World War II. 9 out of 10 German soldiers died on the Eastern Front. Now, a lot of people would say that was due to the winter conditions, but don't forget, really, it was the Soviet Union which broke the back of the Nazis. So they'll be expecting a very favourable negotiating position at these conferences. So and by the way, we've got something, and let me show you. We've got some seeds of Cold War tension, because the Soviet Union really was fighting on land, the Nazis alone, from 1941 until D-Day. So you can see we've got some seeds of the Cold War in the fact that I'm sure Stalin's not too happy that Britain and France haven't tried an invasion of France, occupied France, at this point. So anyway, that's the first leader we're going to look at. The second leader is Winston Churchill. Now, as we are British, we should all know who he is, and yeah, he's very inspirational and charismatic, but he's got a vision, that the British Empire is still going to have influence over Greece, certainly, and parts of Europe, but what he wants to do is preserve the British Empire, preserve that strength, and he especially wants a democratic Poland. Don't forget that when Hitler invaded Poland, that's why Britain declared war on Germany. So it's going to look very weak and odd if we just wash our hands of Poland and let it fall to communism. So that'll be interesting to see as I go through this. And the main US leader we're going to look at is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. Now, he's all very happy and jolly, and he's happy this war's coming to an end. He's not a big fan of war. His hand was kind of forced to go into it by Germany declaring war on America. And, of course, the cultural ties between Britain and America are quite immense. So he's quite jolly in his negotiating. But he's replaced, because he dies, sadly. And when he dies, he's replaced by Harry S. Truman. Now, Harry S. Truman, his leadership style I've left blank now. That's very silly. Now, basically, he's got a massive set of cojones. Okay, you can't write that in your exam, but he's much more bold, and he's much more, I'd say, aggressive. Now, it's really hard to hold with one hand, because he doesn't like communism. He really does not like communism. He sees communism as an evil. So he and Stalin will certainly not get on, as you'll see throughout your Cold War course, especially later on in 1948 with the Berlin blockade and the Berlin airlift. He and Stalin come to diplomatic blows, you could say. Anyway, let's have a look at the actual conferences. So you've got the Tehran conference in 1943, and Stalin basically is like, my comrades, open a second front. Of course he wants them to open a second front. He's still got the Nazi war machine, I wouldn't say at his door. He's broke the back of the main German strength of their army, but still, it's not going to be an easy job. And if a second front is opened, that'll be a lot easier. I don't know why that just did that. That's really annoying. Anyway, right, and then secondly, we've got Churchill. Yes, Churchy boy. Right, that's better. Okay, so Churchill, he doesn't really trust Stalin, he doesn't really like Stalin, he doesn't really like communism, but he agrees to have spheres of influence, okay? So over East and West, and so America and Britain have a sphere of influence over Western Europe, and Stalin will have a sphere of influence over Eastern Europe. But we didn't really think it would look like this. And what happens to Eastern Europe is what Stalin thinks of a sphere of influence is a communist bloc of satellite states. That is not what the West envisaged when we talked of spheres of influence. So essentially, the sphere of influence of the Americans and the British on Western Europe is just investment and friendly diplomacy. The Russians really have an iron fist, and they get their tentacles right into Eastern Europe. I mean, you know, poor Eastern Europe, they just become a bunch of satellite states with no freedom. So they didn't really know at the time, though. So basically, there's an agreement that there's going to be an invasion of France because it's occupied by the Nazis, and they're going to do it early in May. It doesn't happen until June, but at least it happens. So anyway, oh, and by the way, the mood, the mood of that conference is suspicious. They haven't met each other yet. They're all suspicious. So there's a different mood to the next conference, okay? And that is the Yalta conference. So at Yalta, everyone's in a really good mood. They've basically they're just about to defeat Germany. Germany's on its knees. And so they agree to divide Germany into 4 zones. And they also agree, curiously, to divide Berlin into 4 zones. And that's a decision which Stalin would regret. Okay? So Churchill agrees, but he wants a free and open Poland. And Stalin's like, yes, of course we'll have a free and open Poland. Like, totes, dude, that's going to happen. And FDR, we all agree, but what FDR wants is to negotiate something. And you can see, actually, FDR is looking a little bit more ill. So if you compare to the first picture to the second picture, you can see he's a bit more ill in that second picture, and he's basically going to die before the next conference, which is very sad. But what he negotiates is that he wants help against the Japanese. Well, this is Truman's nightmare, because by the Potsdam conference, things have changed. So they've no longer got a common enemy, okay? World War II has finished in Europe. Hitler's committed suicide or run off to Argentina, if you believe in conspiracy theories. It's completely changed. So they no longer have a common enemy. And then, unless they, of course, smash Japan together. And already, Churchill's got concerns over what's happening in Poland, because Stalin doesn't seem to be living up to his promise of open and free elections in Poland. So Poland basically becomes a satellite state. So the country which Britain went to war for in 1939, in 1945, we don't really have the ballsiness to defend Poland properly, and Poland becomes a satellite state. So there's a bit of irony there. And we've got a new man on the scene, which is Truman. That's Truman. It's Truman. So Truman has the atomic bomb, which kind of is a complete turning point in history to have such a devastating weapon. So basically, he kind of tries to show off to Stalin and say, hey, Stalin, guess what I've got? I've got something. And it's an atom bomb. And, oh, you should be scared because we're going to use this and we don't need your help in Japan anymore. I'm going to show you by bombing Japan. Of course, Stalin's response is, dagga dagga da, it's the only Stalin. Okay, he's like, yeah, I know, I have spies. So, in essence, those 3 conferences have completely different moods and completely different outcomes. So, oh, and by the way, I didn't make a mention of Clement Attlee's actually at the Potsdam conference, but he's quite boring and doesn't really do much. So I didn't really make a big deal out of him, and it's Churchill that you need to focus on. But especially you need to focus on the new dynamic between Truman and Stalin. So now, again, what have we got? Oh, we've got some seeds of the Cold War. So are the seeds of the Cold War, are they in this last conference where it's a lot more moody than the previous 2, and where there's a lack of diplomatic agreement between the big 3? I mean, is that where the Cold War starts? Some historians say the Cold War starts in 1941. That's when your course begins. Some people say the Cold War starts in this conference. And some people say that the Cold War starts with the Berlin blockade and airlift. I mean, because it's not really a war. It's diplomatic unfriendliness. So there's no, start. But, these conferences, you need to know them. You need to revise. And I hope that made that very clear for you. Thank you and goodbye. Follow me on Twitter, VikingPoet84.